This month's podcast episodes are proudly sponsored by my own book, Bring Your Product Idea to Life. Have you ever had a great idea for a product? Or does creating a product to sell appeal to you? Where do you begin? How do you come up with a product idea? And if you have an idea, how do you know if it's even viable? In Bring Your Product Idea to Life, I take you through the process of creating your product step by step. From developing your product idea to finding suppliers and launching your product, we cover it all. The book includes advice on how to price your product, where to sell it, and how to find out if anyone will actually buy it. Designed to help you make real progress, Bring Your Product Idea to Life is both practical and motivational. Every chapter includes clear action steps so you know exactly what to do and when. This isn't just a book for reading, this is a book for doing. Bring Your Product Idea to Life is available via Amazon, on my website, and linked in the show notes for this episode. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week, I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking to Sasha Lord from Lord's Fragrance House. Lord's Fragrance House offers scents that are inspired by and named after wonderful places across the planet. Colourfully made in Oxfordshire by industry experts with a mission to add joy to a saturated market of boring branding and the same interior scents. This was a really interesting conversation. We spoke so much about scent and how you design scents and what scent marketing is. Lots of things scent based, as well, of course, the challenges and the good points about running your own business and being able to choose to do things your way. This was a great conversation. Sasha had so much to share with us, and I would love to introduce you to her. So hi, Sasha. Thank you so much for being here.
Hiya, no problem at all. Lovely to be here.
So can we start with you please give an introduction to yourself, your business, and what you sell?
Of course. So yes, I am Sasha, but Sasha Lord, so founder of Lords. And we create unique scents based on memories from travel and sort of inspiration from the world, primarily in the home scent sector, but currently reaching out to other products.
Amazing. Thank you. Now, if you don't mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about your background working for the Aroma Company, so what the Aroma Company is and your role there, just to give people a little bit of context before we start talking about Lord's Fragrance House.
No problem. Of course, it's like how I got into it, and I still very much do that role. I work with both hats on all of the time, and we run both out of the same office. So yeah, it's a really interesting job role. It covers anything and everything to do with fragrance. So and it's how my love for this came about and how Lords even came about. So it's what we do is very broad. It can be whenever I meet anyone in the street and they say, what do you do? I'm like, how long have you got? Because it can be anything from creating and designing scents for brands that don't have them, that are looking to do something engaging and sensory. So we do a lot of work with drinks brands and things like that, through to brands that already have fragrances that are looking to utilize scent marketing. So it can be anything from like immersive sort of touch and play and sniff in events through to printing with scent. It's quite broad. So yeah, it just depends on, so, we've just finished an amazing project with Guinness, for example. So at their storehouse, we've developed some scents for them that take you on the journey of how they make a pint of Guinness. So the water, the yeast, the barley, all those sorts of things, through to working with the big brands that just want to promote their perfumes. So yeah, it's very broad and a very interesting job.
That is so interesting. I have so many questions. Because scent marketing, is that like, so for example, when you go into a clothing store and sometimes there's a particular smell. I don't think you're meant to notice the smell, but I'm told that they do have smells. And I think some stores you can notice it and others maybe it's more subtle. Is that the kind of thing?
Yes, that's one of the areas, absolutely. It could be like hotels, for example, like when the receptions all smell lovely and you get that holiday mood instantly just from the smell. Yes, absolutely. Our opinion is that if you can smell it really strongly, they're doing it wrong. Because if it's done well, it's supposed to be just creating a feeling rather than it being so strong that you really notice that there's an obvious fragrance in there. We can all pinpoint the ones that are doing it and we really notice it.
Am I right in thinking the aroma company is a family business?
So it is currently run by my mum. My mum is the managing director, but originally was founded by a guy called Simon, who's still involved in the business. But yeah, it's very much now run. Me and my mum are running it on a daily basis. So yeah.
And how? So I know that we will talk about your products in a minute. I promise.
Oh,
But I would love to know, how did you get involved? You and John, how did you get involved in this? Because do you go somewhere and study scent?
Yeah, like how do you do
it?
No, it's funny because we work with the Fragrance Foundation quite a lot, and they are always sort of trying to show people pioneering ways of getting into the fragrance industry. And I always feel a little bit like I don't really know how I got into this job, but there are so many different jobs in the fragrance industry. It's super interesting, but I definitely didn't study, I suppose, for this role. My mum fell into it because truth be told, it was almost a location thing. The job came up, Simon, they knew each other already, and her background was finances and banking and stuff. And so she kind of fell into the role and then has learned over the 20 years of working here, the industry. I actually worked for Space NK for a long time. So my background was, I was a makeup artist and was always sort of luxury cosmetics. And essentially, she had someone go on maternity leave about 11 years ago, something like that. And she was like, oh, I don't suppose you fancy doing it for 6 months? Because I was working for a brand, but I was traveling a lot and I was very tired. So I thought, oh, we'll just give 6 months a go of just sort of working somewhere that was more local. And I just fell in love with fragrance. I was already, in love with cosmetics and makeup and all that side of things, but fragrance wasn't something I loved wearing it. And I've always loved candles. I've always been a candle burner. But it wasn't where I originally thought my life would go. But yeah, I just fell in love with it and have never left. So yeah.
Well, thank you. And so thank you so much for giving us that background, because I think that just gives us some context for the next part of your journey.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us the story of how and why you created Lord's Fragrance House?
Absolutely. So it was after, I suppose, 3 to 4 years of doing the other role and falling in love with it, I suppose. It was something that in my mind I would dream of, wouldn't it be amazing to have my own range and put down my ideas of what I could do scent-wise. I've traveled a lot. I've had some amazing experiences, creating memories around the world. And I suppose for years, the idea was building of, if I was to have my own brand, what would I do? How would I do things differently? What would I do if I was to get the chance to do it? And then over lockdown, I suppose everything we were doing at the Aroma Company kind of came to a standstill. As with lots of people's jobs, but we were very event-based, and travel industry and all that sort of stuff was where a lot of our work was. So I just had a bit of time on my hands, and I thought I went through a bit of a tough time personally, relationship ending and all that sort of thing. And I just thought, right, I've got to give it a go. And the ideas, once I started, it just came pouring out. The scents are very much inspired by memories. So I sort of sat there and cried out a lot of stuff, but relived past trips that I've had, amazing times and nature inspiration from. And yeah, the scent ideas were already all there. It was always like picking out my key favorite places that I've traveled to that really have something distinctive. So for example, like Yellowstone National Park, it's got such a distinctive scent memory ingrained in my head. And yeah, so and I think in terms of the idea of how it was going to look and all that sort of stuff, it's the industry is, in my opinion, quite known for, especially in the home scent industry, I always feel you're a bit stuck. I'm someone that loves colour, and if you like what I call like dopamine decor, so colourful, fun, joyful pieces in your home, you tend to have the option of really naff smells. So if you like those beautiful vessels, you normally get quite synthetic, not in my opinion, not all that pleasant smells. They're not my choice of scent. Whereas if you're looking for those beautiful, like really essential oil based or complex fragrance notes, it always tends to be in quite neutral packaging. It's always black and white, or it's brown, or so I wanted to meet in the middle. I wanted to offer really unique, beautiful scents, but in joyful packaging. So it just came out. I don't even really know, because obviously that time period for all of us is such a blur. And it does, sometimes I really have to sit and think, like, how have I got here? Because I don't really feel like it's been 3 years or however long. I suppose the idea's been looming for 10, but 3 years since we properly launched, and I don't really know what's happened in the last 3 years.
I think that's probably because it all just makes so much sense, because I guess you've been working for other brands, maybe creating products for them. And I suppose while you can have input, you can only have so much input because it belongs to somebody else.
Yes.
So I guess it must make sense that while you're doing that, you must have felt at times, oh, well, if I would do it this way, or perhaps I would do that. And obviously, keeping it to yourself. So I suppose all these ideas are just bubbling away.
It was absolutely. And I think, there was a few projects that I worked on for other brands where I was, but I wish I wasn't giving this idea away, or I wish they were doing a smell that was a bit more, not just a regurgitated smell of the same sort of thing. So there's definitely been points over the years where I've thought, I wish I could do it. And so, it just, I gave it a go. I felt like at that point, when you are feeling like you're at rock bottom, I was just like, I've got nothing left to lose, so I may as well just give it a shot. And here I am. Whether it's successful or not, whether it's a profitable business, I don't know, but I'm enjoying it. So,
well, do you know what? Success. I think you define success for yourself. So I think that's actually a very personal thing.
Absolutely.
Because it totally depends on what you want from your business.
Exactly. And I think that's that's definitely something that not that I'm asked for advice very often, and I'm definitely not one to try and give it to people. But I definitely felt like in the beginning, because everything is so colourful, I did get the odd comment of, you're not going to turn people off if they don't like pink or they don't like green. And I could have very easily changed it to try and suit a wider audience, and in what other people were telling me was the right thing to do, and what as you said, what defines a successful brand for me. It needs to reflect how I wouldn't ever want to put something out there that I personally didn't like. So I think it's definitely been an interesting one to try and shut off other people's opinion. And you do, obviously, online you get all these messages all of the time about like how to do things properly, how to run a business, how to run your Instagram, how to run your socials, because I am still doing everything myself, and it's hard to navigate through not knowing when to listen to people and knowing when not to listen to people.
You're right. It's really hard, and especially when you're doing everything yourself. And I think another part of that, it's also hard to know what you have to do and what you don't. So, for example, I don't post that much on Instagram anymore. I do post on Instagram, and especially about the podcast. But to be honest, the podcast is the only thing that I post about, because I just don't have the time or the energy to create content in the way that I used to. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people who tell me that's wrong, but it's not, for me, it's not. For me, that works because I don't have it in me to do more than what I do. And I think that's fine. And I think but that, like you say, it's really hard, because if we listen to everyone, we'd be led to believe that we should be doing all of the things all of the time and doing them all at a really high standard. But that's just not feasible, especially if it's just you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I actually find Instagram the easiest, but purely because I find that the Instagram I've put forward is more me than the business page, if that makes sense. I've done a few like mentorships programs recently, and they've been like, oh, you put quite a lot of your personality into the page, and I'm like, sometimes I probably, there's times where I'm thinking, am I adding too much of me into it? But that's the only way I know how to create content, is by it being me and natural. And otherwise, and also I think people are now that TikTok has become such a thing and there's all these other platforms, I think people are looking for entertainment and escapism on social media. They're not always looking just to be sold to. And if you've got a product-based I'm not just going to keep plugging, here's a product, here's product, and then not giving them any context of how the product exists, why the product exists, why is it like that, how has the day gone making the product and all that sort of stuff. I know that as a user, I find that a lot more engaging, a lot more interesting. TikTok's a whole other story because I just don't know if I'm not tech savvy enough. I feel like I've maybe missed the boat. Not the right generation.
I feel the same. I feel like I should be on there, but I just don't know if I've got it in me. But I think you're absolutely right there. And I think your personality and you and the bits about around the business and why you did things, and that's the thing, that's what's interesting. With all respect, whatever someone's selling, they are more interested in their product. I think, because even
people buy into people, don't they? People buy into that's why podcasts are so interesting, because we're interested in hearing the stories behind people and how they've got there. I think, and that's why they're so engaging, is people like listening to people. That's just how it works. It's how we work as humans.
I think even if your product is really unique, so I've had some people on this podcast selling, really original inventions, and they're interesting. But what I really want to know is, why did you come up with that, and how did you get that to work? That's the interesting bit, isn't it? Yeah, the product absolutely is a product. So I think, and actually I had a guest on, the episode hasn't gone live yet. I did speak to somebody about social media, and her advice was exactly what you were saying, which is we need to be showing our faces and our personalities, because otherwise you're not another sort of home fragrance brand, because yours actually really does stand out, because as you say, it's really bright and it does stand out.
Thank you.
But it's a big marketplace, isn't it? And I think it's
very
really
saturated.
Yeah. So it's brilliant that you are deliberately standing out, because I think a lot of products in the space blend in.
Yeah,
I think what I mean.
Yeah, I do. And I'm not going to call out brands or anything, but I definitely think, like for us, how I try to differentiate the brand through this, the scents is one thing, because I do genuinely believe that the scents that we're offering are special and unique, but obviously online people can't smell them. So that's always been a struggle. It's a struggle for any scent brand, is that what you're selling, people can't sample and they can't smell it. So if they're a first time buyer, you've just got the look of it. So for us, for me when I was designing the product, and my brother-in-law is very much been a part of the product design, which I'm thank goodness that I knew someone that could do it, that could just, when I said, I think I want it to be like this, just got it instantly. Whereas if I'd used someone outsourced, I don't think my ramblings would have made much sense. But it was important that the sort of, because the pink side of things represents me. My favorite color has always been pink. The green comes from my love of nature and the inspiration from nature. And I think it was really important for the differentiation of using the color and being really eye-catching, but also being sustainable, because there's this whole notion that if you're eco-friendly, you must have brown packaging. And it's just not true. The glass is glass, paper is paper. And yeah, it's a sea of beige at the moment, and I'm well aware that it's an aesthetic trend, and I'm definitely in for it sometimes. I just find that you've got the leaders that started the classic looks of the black and white labels, and they already exist. They have a place. They are the leaders in the marketplace. But I think what's happened is that anyone new is just sort of trying to regurgitate what they've achieved and what they've done and the designs that they've put together. So for me, it was like, if I'm going to do this, it needs to be a different way of doing it. So hopefully let's make sure that I'm happy with it. And I think that's all that matters, is that's what I've got to stick to, is that, like, if I'm liking it and I think that I'm doing something that I'm proud of, then that's where I want to sit with the business, leading that way. I don't want to create something that's just me trying to make a money making scheme of, or if I copy that brand, or if I'm influenced by that brand, then maybe it'll sell like that brand's selling. So
well, I think it's really brave to do your own thing, but also, yeah, I think it's a lot more authentic as well. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going for a different style if that's your style, but from what you're saying, this beige and black and white isn't your style. So I think it would have I think what you're doing is more authentic, and I think people can tell that. I think that's something.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
I think so.
Hopefully.
And let's talk a little bit about the other things you're doing to differentiate. And actually, I should ask you, so are you stocked in any retail stores?
So at the moment, I've got a lot of independent retailers, which is amazing. So I sort of focused mainly on stocking with independents, and there's a fair few up and down the country now that offer our products, and we offer the refills in those sites as well. The only sort of bigger retailer that I'm with is Wolf and Badger, but I am hopeful that 2024 and 2025 will bring me my first bigger retailer. I've done a few pop-ups in John Lewis stores, which have gone really well. But they don't, permanently stock me at the moment.
The reason I asked that was because we were talking about differentiating your products. I was going to ask, what feedback you have from retailers and customers who can see your products on a shelf, because as you say, with fragrance, it is so hard, I think, to sell online. I think it's got to be one of the hardest categories to sell online, actually.
It's really tough. I really struggle with it. And because I do my best to sort of offer video content that sort of shows the ingredients like brought to life, but especially because I've tried to create quite a unique scents, a lot of the ingredients that I use people don't really recognize. So yes, I do have things like lavenders and recognizable ingredients in there, but the complete blend is a really complex mix. So we'll sort of highlight the 3 key smells that people might recognize. But in there, you've got a minimum of at least 20 different oils. So trying to translate that online, I find it really tough. That's why I do try and get out as much as I can and do markets and pop-up events and things. And I, only just this weekend gone, it reminds me when I'm, really tired on a Friday night going, oh God, I'm working all weekend. It reminds me when I'm in front of people and they're like, oh my goodness, these are really different. Wow, this is really nice. And you're like, okay, this is why I'm here. It's not because once you've captured that person's attention, buying online is easier because they've smelt them once. They need to smell them once and they know. I am quite lucky in that because of the background with the aroma company, I have a lot at my disposal for offering sort of marketing solutions that are quite helpful. So because of, like, for example, the scented print thing that the aroma company produces, in online orders now, if someone buys one smell, I always put in a little paper sample that's got what we call encapsulated scent. So it's essentially like modern day scratch and sniff. But they are a really great way of sampling the other smells. So I always pop them into other orders, which is very helpful for us. But yeah, it's a tough one for sure.
And are you finding that when your products are in sort of a physical location, are they really standing out?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think it's always, oh wow, look at these colours. Wow, and the colour definitely draws people in. It's this initial, like, we're like, those with sparkly bright things that people get drawn towards, and then when you pick up and smell them, I don't think I've ever had anyone pick it up and then not buy it, if I'm totally honest, which is it sounds big-headed, but it's a nice feeling that when people do have it in their hands, they fall in love with at least one of the smells. But yeah, always amazing compliments on the packaging.
Well, that's amazing. And I guess, as you say, so the challenge is just getting them in front of people.
Yeah. And I think even with the whole sort of neutral aesthetic that is currently in place, if you have a neutral home, people still want pops of colour. And so I'm managing to, whilst I was really worried at first that people that weren't really colourful lovers wouldn't like it, I don't seem to be losing them particularly either as customers, because you will find that person going, oh, that would look really nice as a contrast in the room. So yeah, I think it's definitely, I'm pleased with the decision, even though it was a very scary one at first.
And I will say to anyone who's listening who hasn't actually looked at your products to go to your website, which will be linked in the show notes, because while your products are bright, I also would describe them as elegant.
Oh, thank you.
So they're not loud and, I don't know, they're not loud and, I don't know how to just, what words, they're not loud and brash, and then they are beautiful.
Thank you.
And beautiful.
Yeah, we were really, we wanted to keep the design still classic and sleek. So in terms of the logo, it's not too like busy, I suppose. So it's still really, like I said, it was hard word to capture, because it's still, even though it's using bright colours, it's still quite simple in terms of the design. So it's just really honing in on the pink and the green, and living that pink and green life is kind of how I've ended up embracing it all now. Everything's pink and green. But yeah, it definitely tried to sort of keep it still really classic and modern and sleek, but with a colourful twist.
And everyone does need to go and have a look to see the exact pink and green that you're using. I would love to take a step sort of back, if that's okay, because I really like to talk a little bit about the process of developing fragrances. So how does a fragrance come together? Because you mentioned Yellowstone, you mentioned that you went to Yellowstone and that's one of the places you wanted to invoke that scent memory. How do you go from that to having a finished product in a bottle?
Yeah, of course. So you always start small when it comes to fragrance development. There's multiple ways of doing it. The way that I do it is I will grab inspiration from photos and relive the memory. So, for example, like Monteverde is another one that we have, which is Costa Rican rainforest inspired. And I really wanted to capture that smell of like rain hitting the forest floor, and it be a really overall green scent. So with anyone that sort of develops scents knows that you have what was called the sort of perfumer's organ. So you've got like normally sort of between 50 and 100 ingredients that you will sit and play with, and start really small at blending together. So it's always a case of like one teeny drop at a time, basically, because at the moment that you put 2 drops in versus 1 drop, the whole blend changes. So even if you're using the same ingredients, so you might read on the front of it that it's like lavender and bergamot, and we think, oh, I know what that smells like. But actually, if one's got more lavender than bergamot, then they're completely different blends. So it's finding the balance, I suppose. But also because we were trying to create memories and experiences as a whole, I suppose, rather than this one smells like lavender and rosemary, it was using more oil, because the more complex the blend is, the more you can't really pinpoint what you're smelling. So it was more important for us when we were sort of developing them to evoke a feeling rather than focus in on the single ingredients. But yeah, I think all of them, it's just come from, so for example, with Big Sur, it's supposed to evoke happiness and a sense of calm. That with Trebarwith Strand, that one less so focused on, in people's minds, they're like, oh, it's Cornish based, it probably is a sea salt fragrance, but it's not at all. That one's more based on my feeling of relaxation in Cornwall. So that one is, you've had the best day at the beach, you get back, you have a lovely bath, you're in your PJs more often than not with your family, and you've just got this sense of relaxation and you normally have a really good night's sleep. So that one is what inspired that blend. So yeah, it is a lots of people have different processes when it comes to blending and coming up with ideas, but designing fragrances is by far my favorite part of this job. And I went through a period of time, I started off with 5 key scents, so we did 5 to start with, and then in the last 2 years, I've basically done another 5. And people are like, are you going to stop making new scents at some point? And I'm like, no, because it's the best bit. It's the best bit of the job. I do like making new products, and we are sort of getting into a point now of trying to expand the product ranges in the scents rather than just keep bringing out new smells. But it's a lot of fun.
It sounds fun. It sounds a lot like science, like chemistry as well.
It is. And I don't proclaim to be a perfumer, because actual perfumers they're chemists. They are. I don't do, all of our scents and stuff. They're lab tested, and all of the stuff that you need to tick all the safety boxes that you do when creating and using chemicals. They go off to be, chemist tested. But I think the bit that I do is more like art. So I always try and say to anyone that's interested in this industry that it's a really lovely blend between art and science, because there's not that many jobs where they cross over.
Yeah. That's really nice. And out of interest as well, I have got so many. I'll stop asking questions about smells in a minute. But
that's fine. Ask away.
When you're sort of creating products, do you tend to like get other people to smell them and see what it makes them think of? Because smell is really personal, isn't it? And it's just occurred to me that how, what you like and what I like could be completely different. What a smell, for example, have you ever been to have a massage and they give you a choice of oils and you smell them and then you choose one. And I remember my husband and I having this massage and he smelt this one and he thought it was really uplifting and I thought it smelled like toilet cleaner. And so, and it was the same thing. We both just had a completely different reaction. He was like, oh, and I was like, oh, and same thing. So I just wondered, how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? It's so funny you say that because smell is so subjective, and because the blends are also personal to me. I do have to sometimes have my hat on, especially if it's that time of the month or I'm feeling extra sensitive to sort of, if people don't like them, just let it wash over you, because we do all like different things. And actually, it keeps it interesting. If we all liked the same smells, life would be really boring, because that's just the same as liking different colours, different textures, different clothes, different whatever it might be, different tastes of music. It's the smell is the same. We can't all like the same thing. Yes, there are ones that are more popular, but also because the way that the limbic system works the way that our smell receptors work when we smell things, and the way that it works in our brains, you connect memories to smells. So one person's memory with a smell is different to another person's. We all have different memories. So for example, I often have the same thing with lavender, whereas some people absolutely adore lavender and some people think it reminds them of bad childhood memories with their like mean old grandpa or something, because they used to walk past the lavender bush in their garden. Everyone's got such personal connections to it. And for example, with you in your scenario, you might have had more experience with a particular product that had a particular oil in it that you could pick up when you smelt that smell. So I find it really interesting, and I find it. That's why I love my weekends where you get to sit and watch couples pick the smell that's going to be in their home. Is always quite an interesting one.
Yeah, I can imagine.
trying to get both of them to decide on what one they like it's fun to watch, but also I love it. I find it really interesting, and it gives me scope to consistently be creating new scents because everybody likes different things.
Yeah, and that's great. And that's why, you say that you've got, you just stop creating scents, but actually I think it's good to have a range because there will be something for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And also, I think I love trying to understand what someone. So if I'll always start the conversation with, what do you normally lean to? Do you like normally floral ones, citrusy ones, woody ones? And some people know and some people don't. And I think it's lovely to either understand someone's experience with smell or introduce them to a whole world of, oh yeah, you probably do like florals if you like that sort of stuff, and they didn't really know that they liked that before. So because educating people on it is also some part of this I love. I love running scent workshops and talking people through all of the individual notes, because so often we don't smell the ingredients, we smell like the final finished blend. So for example, like galbanum is something that I love working with. It's in at least 4 of my blends, but it's like the ingredient itself is it's like a resin. It's not even I think we all think we've got this idea that like we just sit and squeeze like lavender petals and oil comes out, but that's not really how it works. But certain ingredients are really interesting to work with, and that's one that always, to me, whenever I smell it, it just reminds me of like soil and sort of that earthy smell that you get when you're in the woods. But that paired with different things can create such a different blend. And it's not something that anyone would ever go, like, for example, like with pine oil, because we've got such an association with it, with like cleaning products, but actually pine oil is so beautiful. So it's such a shame that we have this association with it. So I'm hoping that certain ingredients that people, like the galbanum thing, it might be a new ingredient that people open their eyes to, and that they can pick it up in other products, even if it's not ours. Think, this reminds me of that. So it's nice.
Yeah, and it's all just, like you say, it's all just so fascinating how it all works. And final question on your products, this is something I'm also really interested in, is that you mentioned that as well as expanding your scent range, you're also trying to expand to different products with your scents. How easy is it to replicate a scent across different products? So say you've got a perfume and a body wash, for example, just picking two random products. How easy is it to have them both smelling the same?
Do you know what? That's actually the easiest part, and
really?
I think it's something that people don't realise, because I know that, for example, going back to the aroma company, we use what's known in the industry as the juice. It's the pure oil. So how the industry works is you have this oil that's made by fragrance houses. That is your base oil. It's the concentrated version of the blend. That is what goes into all the products. And that's what we would work with at the aroma company, whether we're doing diffusion work, whether we're doing the print work, whatever it might be. And so once you've got that base oil, you can create any product. I think and then you basically go by paperwork and guidelines of the sort of industry standards of safety, I suppose, of what the levels are you should use of that pure oil in different products. So most candle brands, for example, which is why you'll have it that, sometimes you are really excited about a candle that you've bought and you really quite like the smell of it, but when you've burnt it, it's not giving you a whole lot. The scent throws not very much. You can't really smell it a whole lot. And that's 9 times out of 10, it's because the percentage of oil in there is very low. You play around with, most of the time, between 1 and about 12% when it comes to sort of fragrance oil in something like a candle. Ours are always at 10. You have to always play around with, every candle, every product we make, we normally make about 20, just so you make sure you get the balance right, of like the wick, the wax ratio to the oil. But yeah, in terms of making new products, where we've just launched sort of the hand and body range, so we've just launched washes and creams and things. Once you've got that base oil, it's actually fairly simple a process to convert it into lots of other products. It's more the packaging than anything else that's tough, because for us it was so important to be sustainable and offering refills, and whilst it looking pretty, it also being really kind to the planet. So for us, packaging is more of a bane than the fragrance side of things. But yeah, in short, it's actually a fairly simple process once you've got that base oil to convert it into other products. I think it's just important to play around with the percentages that you use, so that, for example, a body cream smells, but it's not too strong, and that the components of it are right, that the balance of the scent that you're trying to create, once it's mixed with your own pH and your smell, that the smell is still there, if that makes sense.
It does.
Just sort of play around.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. And before we finish off, let's just talk a little bit about refills, because you have mentioned them, and I think your refill service is quite unique.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it was just important. It's a super tough one, because in an ideal world, we'd have this big setup that everyone could just bring their bottle to, and you'd come fill it up, and you'd have stations up and down the country. But, that's not possible. And retail space isn't something that we have a lot of. So we've tried our best to, yes, we offer our local people to where we make everything. They can all come, and they do. We have a great relationship with our local people that buy from us, and they do come into our production facility, and they come and refill their bottles. Online, it's a tougher one, in that it was really important to me to, if you're going to offer a refill, don't offer just another piece of plastic to replace. So if you, for example, you've got I see big brands doing it all the time, it does my head in. You've got like the original soap bottle that's plastic, and then the refill that's just to refill one bottle is also plastic. I'm like, you're not saving anything. It's kind of greenwashing. So for me, we have everything is glass, and then the refill canisters that you get are always at least two times the size, so you can refill it twice. But you can also send vessels back to us for a code, so so that you can save on your next purchase, and then we repurpose and clean up the vessels again. So yeah, I think the next step is candle refills, because at the moment we do all liquid, so the hand wash, like reed diffusers, the room sprays, all that sort of thing. Anything liquid is very easy to offer as a refill, and it was important to me not to focus too much on the packaging of the refill. A lot of companies I see have quite clearly spent a fortune, and there's a lot of plastic investment in the refill, I suppose. Whereas for me, it was a lot of research into actually the most widely recycled material is aluminium. So our refills are offered in aluminium at the moment, which might not look that pretty, but you've already bought the pretty initial thing. You don't need the pretty refill. But candle refills are something I'm working on, because it's just getting the production line. You have to have lots of molds to make candle refills. And so the investment to have a lot of molds made, so that you're not pouring liquid wax into glass, you're pouring it into these molds. So it's just the investment, and we'll get there. It's just, you need some cash flow to keep investing in all these things, but it's definitely on the agenda.
Yeah, and that's exciting. And actually, I was having a very similar conversation with a guest earlier today about the fact that you also don't have to do everything at once. You know, how there can be this temptation to sort of be and do everything, and actually it's fine to do what you can and know this is what you like to be doing in a year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. Absolutely. It's okay to be working towards it, isn't it? Because I think if we all waited until we were doing everything perfectly, we would never get anything done.
Well, no. And the thing is, yes, absolutely. In an ideal world, I would have already had like everything from the get-go, because sustainability and looking after the planet has always been such at the forefront, because I have such a love of animals and wildlife and the world that we live in. But you can't do everything at once. No. And the candle molds, for example, are such an investment that it will take us a couple of years probably to get to the point that I want to be at with them. But you do what you can. You do what you can, and do your best. And that's realistically all that any of us can be doing, is just try your best to be as sustainable and as eco-friendly as you possibly can be. So yeah, definitely. But yeah, like you said, it's hard, especially the climate of where we are at with everything that we see on social media. And I'm comparing myself to, and the brand to, are brands that have been going 30, 40, 50 years, that have got investors. So sometimes I'm like, you just give yourself a break.
Not just investors, but resources as well. They have offices and teams and
absolutely.
Just a lot more than what small businesses have. But I think it's interesting though, because I do think that we could look at some of the bigger, not all, but some of the bigger brands are probably not doing as much as some of the smaller brands, despite having all of those resources. Yeah,
I think I find it perplexing sometimes when I see it's more the supermarkets where I see the issues. I'm like, you've got, and I hate to call them out, but you've got Unilevers and P&Gs of the world that have got all the budgets there, and the investment that they're putting is not in those places. And like you said, you go to things like smaller trade shows, or you're even at markets and things, and you've got people holding small businesses really to account of like what they're. So, for example, like there's on our glass soap bottles, I really struggled at first how to ship them with the pump on, because the pump that I wanted is metal, not plastic. But you can't ship it with that pump on, because it wasn't leak proof when it was like in transit. Just playing around with how I can ship them, and the cap that you could ship them in would need to be plastic. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't like it was hundreds of thousands of people. There was probably about 4 people. But I was just like, have you seen what the majority of brands are just, the whole thing is plastic? And I don't know, it's an interesting one, what we find acceptable when the price is lower as well, I suppose. But yeah, I just think as long as as long as there's an attempt to try to be better, that's where my head's at with it all.
Absolutely, because, you said earlier, in a perfect world, you'd be doing all of these things, but we don't live in a perfect world, unfortunately. So I think we all just need to do our best and accept that everyone else is doing their best.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In all manner of things. I think that's definitely something I've learned through all of the, especially going back to the Instagram side of things, is you can really get a skewed view of what things look like through that. And I don't even necessarily think it's a bad thing, because of course we post the positive things a lot of the time. Of course people post the highlights of their life, because we're not going to sit there and post daily about how miserable we feel. I think it's good to add that in for balance, but I found it interesting when I first started going to events and pop-ups and Christmas markets and things like that, where you're meeting a lot of other small brands and small businesses and hearing the same feelings, the same story, because it can be really lonely as a small business. You are more often than not working on your own, and you don't get to speak to other people about how it is and how they're feeling a lot of the time. And so creating those smaller communities has been invaluable to me, to be able to chuck ideas around of like, oh God, did that work for you doing that sort of pop-up, or what about that event? And God, that was really tough that week, wasn't it, with the amount of people that were there. And I think it's just a nicer exercise to be able to share that sort of things and not just focus on what we're seeing on screen.
Definitely. I think community and actually just connecting with other people is so important.
Yeah, because we did lose that, I think, it's an interesting one over COVID, is that I don't know if everybody else is over it, but I don't feel like I'm over it. I don't feel like I've come out of it. I've come out of the feeling, of it not. The uneasiness is still there. I still feel like people don't really know, like, are we in the office? Are we not in the office? Are we doing things on Zoom? Are we meeting people in real life? And I think it's an interesting one in the workplace, especially, that people don't really know how to talk to each other anymore. I feel like more and more people, even though we started doing, like, Zoom became so much more of a thing, I think we all sort of resorted to doing things on email, when actually they probably could get done on a phone call, and you'd have a better flow. And I would say in the last 6 months, the amount of physical meetings, especially with the aroma company, that I've had have increased. And boy, oh boy, do you get more done, you get more out of it, and more creativity flows when you actually get to properly speak to people, rather than everything just being on screen and over more typing. I think talking like this is great. I'm more talking about, like, emailing and messaging and stuff. I think you just lose. Also, things that can be in written word can be taken in different ways. So you could actually mean something and someone's read it a different way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And while I think things like this are great, the only thing that I do slightly miss is there were certain things that went online 4 years ago that have never come back in real life. And that I do think is a shame, actually.
It's a shame. It is a shame. But also, what I hate about this is that smell-o-vision, I don't think, will ever be a thing. I would be really astounded if anyone techie ever gets smell-o-vision to actually work. And I just would love to be able to share with you and share with people what things smell like on a screen. The closest I've ever come is when people were talking about people having a chip in your brain that makes you think you're smelling something rather than you actually smelling it. But even some of the tech that I've seen where you actually have, like, the molecules, you have the fragrances, there are thousands and thousands of ingredients that make up different smells. And so even if you had this headset that was like a VR headset that could make you smell things, you could probably only smell like 5 different things. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but that's definitely something that in my industry I struggle with, because when we're doing installs with the other company, and I'm working with normally we work with the sound people quite closely, and we work with the visuals, the lighting and the screens and all that sort of thing, and all their jobs, they can just upload it like that. They can change the content really quickly, whereas with smell there has to be a physical element, and it definitely has its constraints at times.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's not like you can just email someone a smell.
No. No, exactly.
That would be good. Okay, so thank you for all you've shared, Sasha. I know you said you don't like giving advice, but my final question, and I ask everyone this, so I'm not picking on you, is what would your number one piece of advice be for other product creators?
I would probably say to just listen to your gut. And I guess going back to what I was saying earlier, that if someone tells you that they don't think that your product's good or that it won't sell in the way that you're doing it, despite the fact that you really believe in it, if you really believe in it, listen to your gut, listen to yourself, and try. Yes, you can take advice off of other people. And yes, I think if you've got like Dragon's Den people in front of you, don't ignore everything they're saying, but still stick to your guns. If you truly believe and are passionate about what you're doing, and it's going to make you happy, that's actually what this is for. I think you can lose sight of decision making when money gets involved and you start thinking, oh, well, that's not going to make me any money. And I just think it's important to stick to like the reasons why you started it in the first place. What were you trying to achieve? And stick to your gut on whether you think it's a great thing to do.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you've shared, Sasha.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me and listen to me ramble on.
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you.
Good. Oh, good.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.